Hello there, thank you for joining us and welcome to InsideHR. I'm James Marsh. This is the first in an exciting new series of webinars for HR practitioners brought to you by HR Review. On Thursday, the 26th of March, in partnership with My Family Care and Care4, I chaired a panel of experts to take a look at childcare vouchers ahead of the proposed launch of a government tax-free childcare scheme in September this year. Joining me on the day were three people with the InsideHR track on employer-supported childcare and what the new government proposals will mean for employers come the autumn. Over the course of the discussion, we received a huge number of questions from listeners, conducted a live poll, and shared exclusive research findings. We were joined by Ben Black, Managing Director of My Family Care, who, together with HR Review, have conducted a survey of employers on childcare benefits, which we'll be discussing at length in the webinar you're about to hear. Next, we had Julie Barker, who is the Client Services Director of Care4, which is part of the Grassroots Group. And the final member of our panel was Garrett Jones from AJ Consulting. Now, due to a technical error at our studio in London on the day, we're unfortunately unable to bring you the first few minutes of our webinar audio, during which, in addition to an introduction from me, we summarise the key points of the new government scheme and what it entailed. The government plan to launch their new tax-free childcare scheme from September this year, which will, in effect, allow parents to get childcare subsidies directly online rather than through their existing employer's childcare voucher scheme. Tax-free childcare will provide a saving of 20 pence in every pound spent on childcare up to £10,000, meaning an annual saving of £2,000 per child per year. The government scheme will provide higher savings for many parents and will be available to those who are self-employed. But those already part of an employer-led voucher scheme will be able to remain so long as they are still employed by the same employer and do not opt out in favour of the government scheme. The new tax-free scheme will not provide any savings on national insurance for employers, who now must decide if they wish to continue offering their own voucher schemes to existing participants beyond September, after which nobody new will be able to join. Also, many companies have built their family-friendly strategy and their employer brand image around offering childcare support. With this option now removed from September for new employees, what can these companies now do to ensure that they are still supporting employees with dependent families and maintaining that image as a family-friendly organisation to work for? We can join Thursday's discussion just after I'd asked my guests just that. What should employers be doing right now to prepare for these changes? The first voice you'll hear is that of Garrett Jones.
We can't force you to read them. Here's a calculator, which ideally I would like to see the voucher provider people providing, so that it's a ready built calculator that people can put on their intranet sites, in order for the employee then to make their decision. What HR practitioners, I know, won't want to get into is helping employees make those calculations.
Yeah.
It is purely, there's the information you need to know, there's a handy little tool that will help you get on and make your decision.
Yeah, so you don't want to be seen to be influencing that decision one way or the other.
And I think from a childcare voucher point of view, obviously we will be supporting our clients in giving some type of winners and losers document that will help employees to understand if they'll be better off or worse off. But it will just be examples, and hopefully when we get finer detail from the government for the launch, etc., we'll do more in terms of calculator, etc. at that point.
So employers shouldn't be leading people down a particular path, but what they do need to do is provide this information, because it is a complex calculation, isn't it? Depending on your income, how many kids you've got.
Yeah, and I think there's a risk if an employer pushes somebody down a particular path, there's a risk there.
Sure.
I think it's worth pointing out, generally though, the new scheme is more generous than the old scheme.
Yeah.
So as a general rule, Julie, most people will be better off in the...
A lot of people will be better off. There are some people who will be worse off. It does really depend on what the childcare costs are, really.
Sure.
So it is an individual situation. There are a lot of people that will be better off, but there are some people, additional taxpayers, people where there's only one parent working, etc., where they will actually be worse off.
Also, in terms of the ease of use of the new scheme, so you have to, every quarter, go online and reaffirm that you're eligible to receive this tax-free support. Is that going to be something that people are going to find easy to do? Is it logistically going to be easier than a voucher system provided for by your employer, where for the new scheme the onus is on you to be actively going online each quarter, filling out details to make sure that you're still eligible for this scheme, whereas an employer-supported voucher scheme would appear, we don't know yet because obviously this hasn't happened yet, would appear to be simpler sort of in terms of ease of use.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our scheme is very simple. The employee signs up at the start of the scheme, and they can authorise payments and set those up for the year in advance. So they don't need to touch anything once they're in the scheme. With tax-free childcare, there is this entitlement period, and they do need to reconfirm every 3 months. The feedback that we've received so far is that parents are busy, and they have a concern about that, but obviously we just don't know how that's going to pan out and what that reconfirmation is going to entail at this stage.
I would just add to that, James. The government has been very clear to say the new scheme must be easy, must be simplified. And one of the reasons I think they've gone for NSI is because it's good and big, and it is national savings are very easy, and it's a scheme that works.
Well, I know we want to talk more about that decision as well.
But I make the point on vouchers. Sure. When vouchers came in, it was complicated, and I think the childcare voucher schemes and Care4 in particular, they work brilliantly now. But it certainly took them a few years to become brilliant at the start.
Yeah.
So, we have a childcare business, and you go back 7 or 8 years, childcare providers were up in arms about the complicated payments coming through. So I think it works brilliantly now, but there will be a settling in period, I'm sure, which is a bit complicated, sure, whatever the government says.
Sure. In terms of, we've talked a lot about the communication aspect. So if we take a look at some of the key findings from the survey that we did, this is a survey of employers conducted by My Family Care and HR Review. The fact that 1 in 4 respondents admitted to being unaware of the coming changes is quite striking, 25%. We hope they're all listening now. But there are also concerns around that transition, and 85% believe that communicating the changes to their employees clearly was their most pressing concern. So we've discussed that it's about information rather than trying to lead employees down a particular path. But in terms of the actual logistics of communicating this, obviously it will depend on the size of the organisation, the nature of the organisation. But in terms of what do we think the best ways are of actually physically communicating these changes to employees in organisations?
I think one of the issues at the moment is the lack of clarity as to exactly how this is going to work, when it's going to start, when can carers start being paid by this new scheme, and so on. And having been in the corporate environment for a long time, I know as soon as you raise anything with employees, they'll start asking questions. Yeah. And the don't know responses will mean that they will be happy. Sure. So I think it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. You want to communicate, but until you've got all the answers, I think it's quite difficult to communicate anything.
Just to interrupt very quickly. I've just been informed that we've had a couple of technical issues for the first minute or so of this. So apologies if you lost audio with us. We hope you can hear us clearly now. In terms of these changes and the impact it's going to have on employers, what do we think the biggest impact is of this?
Well, I think from the employer angle, I think Ben touched upon it earlier. Sure. It's childcare vouchers has been an incredibly popular benefit for employees. So it's a very obvious family-friendly benefit. Yeah. And in a lot of benefit packages, it feels it's the only one. Because people tend not to think of life assurance as being family-friendly. Mm-hmm. It is, because if the main earner dies, then there's money to support the family. But as a family-friendly benefit, it stands out there as being the most obvious. It's got big take-up, and Julie will probably be better than me, but I would generally expect a 10% take-up within the company. So a lot of people take it, bearing in mind that 10% may churn over 5 or 6 years. So a lot of people have experienced childcare vouchers. And of course, the company gets NI savings, which is always useful. Yeah. So it feels they're losing a really good benefit that engages employees and at least covers their costs as well. They're losing that, and I think it's an opportunity for HR people to review what else they can do on the family-friendly front. What else is out there that could take the place of childcare vouchers in a benefits program? And there are some exciting things out there that we could have in the diverse world we live in. It's not just about childcare; it's about eldercare as well nowadays. I think it's useful to review policies, flexible working policies might be good to review, and so on. So
sorry, I was going to say, I think I concur with everything Gareth says. I think it's a huge opportunity. 10% is probably the average take-up of childcare vouchers, but there are some 38% of a typical demographic who have children or elderly parents to worry about. So it's 28% of the typical workforce who aren't accessing childcare vouchers. So there's a massive opportunity and a cost and a risk for companies when vouchers go to say, what are we doing around family friendly now? We need to actually sit back and work out how we engage with people who do want to combine career with some kind of family commitment.
And in the last company I worked at, there was that question being raised, in that I think the average age in the company was around about 35. Not everyone, and indeed most people, didn't have a family, and therefore when you start advertising childcare vouchers, it's a case of, that's all well and good if you've got a family, but what's in it for me? And then you've got to sort of spell out, well, your time might come, if you're that way inclined, to have children, but otherwise nothing. So I do think it's a good opportunity in the diverse environment we all work in now to actually sort of look for something different, to engage, as Ben said, the people that weren't engaged in childcare vouchers.
Excuse me, just before we go on to those things, one of the things you mentioned earlier was the loss of the national insurance savings. Is there going to be a major financial impact for employers in terms of HR budgets, and how will that affect that? Is that because obviously there's things that I've read that says that impact is going to be huge. Is that being over exaggerated? Is it a significant loss?
I think it depends how generous you are with your current package. Some people will plough back some of the national insurance savings they make to give extra childcare vouchers or reduce the price. So they already feel like share that NI saving. There can be some fairly generous maternity provision where when people go down on statutory maternity pay and they're taking childcare vouchers, the employer will cover the cost. There's a cost to the flexible benefits program that a lot of these schemes run through, not all, but there are costs involved that the NI saving is already being used for, if you like. But I suspect that when people start doing their sums, they will be losing an amount. I wouldn't say it would be.
But Gareth, in black and white terms, effectively, you have a childcare voucher scheme. There is an NI saving, and it probably covers the costs of everything you mentioned. The way employers are generous. When childcare vouchers go, and I know it's a gradual decline, but whatever else you do around family friendly will have a direct cost.
Yes.
So it's an opportunity, but also childcare vouchers going is a cost for employers if they want to do something else.
So agreed. Yes.
I agree with that, and one of the critical things with employer-supported childcare is the employers have been able to use some of their NI savings to really be able to communicate and promote this benefit. Obviously, with tax-free childcare, there needs to be a way of engaging parents to join that scheme, and obviously we're not going to have necessarily the employers any communication going forward. The employer's going to have to pay for because they're not going to have the NI savings. So if they are signposting people, that is going to be a cost to them.
Sure. Anyways, we're just going to, because of our technical issues and we lost communication for the first couple of minutes, we're just going to recap some of the major changes and what they entail. And Julie spoke so well on it earlier, and we're not sure that everyone got it. So could we just recap that?
Okay, so tax-free childcare basically it will enable working parents, so 2 working parents or single parent families, to be able to set up a childcare account, which every 80p that they put in, the government will pay a 20p top up. up to a maximum of £2,000 top-up, so £8,000 per child a parent needs to put in order to get a maximum of £2,000 from the government, and it's a per child arrangement, so if you've got 5 children you can have 5 childcare accounts.
Okay. And for those people who are on existing, who receive vouchers from their employer already, they can continue to do that?
Yes, absolutely. If they're in the scheme at the point that tax-free childcare launches, then they can continue to grandfather that scheme.
And is there a cut-off point for that beyond September, where people won't be able to get vouchers anymore?
If they're in the scheme, it's at the point that they're ineligible anymore. So if they change employer, or if their child becomes of an age up to age 15, for example, then obviously their benefit will stop at that point.
I think that's quite important. So people could be in a childcare voucher scheme for another 12, 14 years.
Yes.
So this will be a huge, long runoff for employers and employees. So childcare voucher schemes will be here for.
And the one issue there, though, is how long will childcare voucher providers provide the benefit for? Because as there's a dwindling population, when does it become not cost effective for a provider to be able to keep providing those childcare vouchers? I mean, it feels to me as though it's probably not going to be for 14 years. It's probably going to be more like 3 or 4 years before the numbers of people drop to such a level taking childcare vouchers. It's no longer possible to continue. And
that's difficult to assess. If you go back to the changes in 2011, where higher earners, the arrangements changed for higher earners, we thought that the higher earners coming in at £124 per month would reduce the average payments through the scheme very quickly, because new joiners could only join at a much lesser value. Because of the exercise to make sure that people were in before that stage, we haven't seen that drop as significantly as we originally thought. So again, we just don't know at this stage how quickly that's going to impact. But obviously, every time somebody leaves an employer and moves to a new employer, they would have to join tax-free childcare because they would be out of the system.
Okay, just a big thank you to everyone who's sending us questions. We've got a load of them coming in here. There's a general election in May. Is there a chance that this doesn't happen depending on who gets in?
I think everyone's to tell you the political point.
Yeah.
It makes sense for employers to be family friendly these days for all the reasons we know: flexible working, talented women getting to the top, diversity. These are all good things. So I think the government, if you scratch the surface of the Treasury, the government has understood that employers want to be family friendly, and I think every party knows that. So the thought that a government will say, actually, we're going to help employers again, despite all the warm noises, I think is unlikely. So I think the bigger risk to this not happening is the court case that's rumbling on in the background. But my understanding, and I know both parties reasonably well, is that they're committed to this change.
So this is actually this is one of our listener questions. This was sent in from Malcolm. Talking about what you've just said, Ben, I've heard that the childcare voucher providers are challenging the government's award of the contract to NS&I, National Savings and Investments, and that there's some doubt as to whether these changes will actually take place in the autumn this year. Has this been resolved?
No, it hasn't, and I think there has been a court case, but they're waiting for the powers that be, the judges, to give them a ruling. As I understand it, the government didn't behave brilliantly in the way they did the tender. Voucher schemes, the big voucher providers on the whole are brilliant, and it's a well-loved scheme, and the government led them down the garden path when they're going through the changes and then appointed NSI at the end. And I think what they did possibly wrong is there's some European rules on procurement, and if there's a big tender, which this obviously is, you have to make it an open, fair playing field, and I'm not sure.
So it goes through an open tender.
Exactly, and I think my understanding is, if there's a way to challenge, that would be the way to challenge it, but I'm not sure when the decision will come out.
Okay. Do we believe that the challenge has a chance of changing the arrangements, or are we just talking about a delay while they work this through?
And I think there is a chance. I mean, I was a lawyer a long time ago, but you never take something to the Court of Appeal and spend all the money doing it unless you think you've got a decent chance of success.
Yeah.
So I think once you're in the higher echelons of our legal system, of course it can go either way.
Okay, so let's just again go back to the fact that childcare vouchers have been the central pillar of people of offering or being seen to be family friendly. So, if not childcare vouchers, what can employers be doing now? We've talked about flexible working and other things. What should employers be looking at now in terms of being family friendly and making sure their employer brand is one that is family friendly, if they're not going to have vouchers to lean on now?
Well, when employers look at family friendly, there are always three parts to the mix. One is culture, getting the culture right, the chief exec and the managers on board. The second is all the maternity coaching and mentoring, helping parents get some clarity on the choices they make between work and family. And the third is some practical support, which is obviously where childcare vouchers fit in a very obvious and financial way. So I think employers can look at any one of those three pillars and do something. And I always think if you're trying to be family friendly, you just need to pick what you're going to do, and then you do it very well. Garrett will know much more about this from his previous roles, but you just need a clarity of vision and pick how you're going to support working parents and hopefully carers as well, and then do it well.
I agree. I mean, I think there's some maternity and paternity coaching that can take place in organisations is always incredibly well received by the employees concerned. It does lead to stronger retention of those employees. The maternity leavers do come back if they're better equipped to cope with that work-life balance, and it does work. I think that sort of flexible working policies now are getting far more widespread than even a decade ago, and I think part of that could be the financial crash. People have suddenly started thinking, actually, money isn't everything. Bonuses, we don't get anymore. And actually, my life is worth more.
They're more concerned about quality of life.
Yeah, and I think that's given HR a bit of a push to actually how can we make this a nicer place to work? And part of that is looking at work-life balance and flexible working. It can save a huge amount of cost. When you look at the cost of nurseries in London, I would guess it's about £2,000 a month, so £500 a week. So some sort of flexible working 4-day weeks instead of 5-day weeks, could save employees a lot of money.
So going back to the survey, when we asked employers about the other provisions that they've made to support working parents, the most popular ones were 72% said of the culture that's open to flexible or agile working. 74% cited the fact that they offer an employee assistance program. 62% have talked about enhancing maternity pay. They offer enhanced maternity pay on top of what statutory that people are entitled to. 91% are now using the kit days, the keeping in touch days, which is really good news, I think. And 75% have cited their readiness for shared parental leave, which we know is another big change that's happened around working parents and childcare and maternity. So, bear with me. Sorry, 1 second.
I'll comment on what you just said in the
yeah,
survey.
yeah.
Well, no, whilst you're the enhanced maternity pay, that's an opportunity for employers, because with shared parental leave, these days people work flexibly and people do want to combine career and family, as a generalisation, and it is easier for people to do that. So there is an opportunity for employers out there to increase paternity pay a little bit, to reduce generous maternity packages, and with the end of childcare vouchers, possibly you have that line in the sand to say, look, childcare vouchers are going, this is how we're going to do family friendly. And if you get some money back from reducing the maternity package, but say we want everyone to come back and work flexibly and there's more money for parents, that's for fathers, that's it's not easy to do, but it's certainly possible for some of the larger employers.
Yes.
Now, and some of the stats actually not included on the slide that our listeners have just seen. over half of the employers who responded, 52% said that they offer career break options as well, things like sabbaticals. And over a third, which I think is really interesting, have offered best practice guidance to their managers. They've designed a training program for their managers on how to manage the specific needs of parents and carers, which I think we'd all agree is a really encouraging thing for employers to be doing. 34% of them are responsible for doing that. We think that everyone should be doing that, right?
Yes, I think changing managers' attitudes in many cases is absolutely critical to the culture of an organisation. There are still some fairly old-fashioned style management around in these organisations, and they need educating. So I think that sort of coaching would be very, very
That's
useful.
one of the reasons people do maternity coaching, because you train a woman going on maternity to get some clarity on the choices she makes, but you also teach her, you're training her to ask the right questions. So it's often those women going back and saying to their managers, no, you got that wrong. This is the question you should ask me, because this is how you should do your job. And honestly, this is an easy conversation, because I do want to come back as long as you behave properly. So you have coaching up as well as
and this
coaching
is
down.
a really important focus, isn't it? Because this is a very common, whatever the issue, this is about HR being on one page, but making sure that the managers are all on the same page as well, and they receive the right training to deal with this, to deal with these issues, and to be able to, because it's the managers that have the direct contact with the employees.
And I think managers generally want to be supported by HR, and one way of supporting them is giving them the coaching that they need to deal with those maternity questions. And gosh, I've been talking to one unemployed, they want to come back part-time. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And it's, well, how do you treat them? And it's all very important. And I think maternity coaching for managers as well as the employees, really, really useful.
So employers should be investing in training for managers. That we're all agreed on.
And I think a lot of employers are already looking at that now, with all the changes to paternity and maternity over the last 18 months. Certainly my view is that when I've been speaking to our clients is that a lot of people are working on their policies now to improve their policies on maternity and paternity.
Great, so we've just got about 10-15 minutes left. I just want to tell our listeners about our live poll, which you can access by clicking on the Votes button above your slide display there. Our live poll today, which we'd love you to get involved with, is of all the issues raised by the changes to Childcare Tax Vouchers, which is the most pressing, in your opinion? 1, the lack of clarity and communication and guidance from the government on the proposed changes, which we've talked about. The need for employers to find family-friendly benefits to replace employer involvement in childcare vouchers. 3, communicating the details and the pros and cons of each scheme for existing childcare vouchers. We've talked about the importance of communication already. Or 4, which we've also covered, and we'd love to know what you think, the loss of the employer NI subsidy, the national insurance subsidy, as old schemes are closed to new applicants. So to get involved with that, just click on the Votes button above your slide deck there. Whilst that's going on, whilst you're all getting involved doing that and carrying on sending us your questions, thank you very much for that. Is there anything we looked at the stats of what employers are doing, we've talked about flexible working, we've talked about training for managers. Is there anything missing from the survey results? Anything that you guys think is really important that employers should be looking at doing?
Well, I would just go back to we talked a lot about childcare. There is the Eldercare issues as well that are a feature in the workplace. So if we are talking about family friendly, I think we all ought to be talking or thinking about it's both ends of the life spectrum, not just.
We're talking about carers as well as parents.
Yes,
I know this is one of the benefits that's increasingly popular, and obviously this is one of the things we do, but on the practical side, the 2 times of stress for a working parent are when you have to find childcare and find it and pay for it, which where vouchers come in, and also when it breaks down. And it's one of the things we do. But emergency childcare, when you're helping parents at their most stressed, and especially when they are, they fought for some flexible working, childcare is still not an acceptable excuse for not completing your work commitments. And childcare is one of those funny markets. There is some fantastic supply out there. It's just matching supply and demand. So I think the business case for backup care, where you're actually helping people work when they otherwise wouldn't be, is easier to make, and it's only being one of those services that's very popular in the city and is only gradually going wider than that these days.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, having used emergency childcare myself on numerous occasions, it's a fantastic benefit, and not just for the employee but for the employer, because I've had times when, well, actually she was about 3 at the time, when my 3-year-old was ill and I had meetings. I get stressed and thinking, oh, I need to postpone, I need to cancel. No, I don't. I can just phone up and get a nanny in place for the day. That means I can go into work slightly late, but at least the work gets done, which suits my employer, and I'm less stressed. So I agree with you. I think it is really useful having that sort of resource.
Just to let our listeners know, obviously they will be able to listen again to the podcast. If you've missed anything or we rattled through something too quickly for you to write it down, you will be able to listen again and get hold of that information. So in terms of the launch date of September, we know that there's an appeal going on at the moment. So is it going to be that the appeal is going to have to be concluded before we hear more detail from the government about the launch of this?
I think this is all anecdotal. My understanding from listening to bits of gossip out there in the industry and government is September might happen, but I suspect there's a very, very good chance it will be delayed, and September is the earliest possible time for this to happen, and it's almost like the quiet starting pistol rather than the big bang where everyone needs to be on board. So from that point of view, employers should be slightly more relaxed. September is a starting point, not a finishing point.
Yeah, and I think we're probably not going to get any more definitive timing until after the elections now. We may be surprised, but I think after May will probably be when we get the timetable.
Okay. Just in terms of the practicalities of the new scheme and how parents will be able to access their accounts and their money, can we just go through the logistics of that and how that will work? So they're going to be able to access this online, they're going to have an account.
Yep.
How do they pay into it? Who can pay into it? That kind of stuff. Just the sort of the more practical side of it.
So the understanding, the proposal is that there'll be a childcare account can be set up for each child. So one account, and anybody can pay into that account for that child in order to get the subsidy.
Okay, and we've got a really good question here from Andrea, who's a tax specialist and insurance officer. She asks whether if you have children who are on an existing voucher scheme and they want to stay with that voucher scheme, they then have another child who will be too late to be covered by employer supported vouchers and will obviously then have to be part of the government's tax-free scheme if they want childcare support. Are we going to end up with a situation with parents in 2 different systems?
They can't be in both.
Right.
It's not clear at this stage if you're in employer-supported childcare and you have another child, whether that extra child could be added, in my view. But it's more likely that for that new child you would have to go into tax-free childcare, and you would need to make a decision at that point as to whether employer-supported childcare or tax-free childcare is best for you in your situation.
Okay. So if we move on to some other of the questions that we've got coming in here. Sorry, they're flooding in thick and fast. Let's just have a look through here. So one of the aspects of the new scheme as well is that it won't just be parents who can pay into their account. It can be other members of family as well. If grandparents want to get involved, aunts, uncles, they can pay into the account as well. Is that right? Absolutely.
The account is for the child. There can only be one account per child, but who pays into that? It doesn't really matter.
There's one theory, James, that one of the biggest challenges employers in the country's got is the eldercare issue. Social services is pretty broken. People are living older. We are all going to have dependent parents, and there's a chance. We never got childcare vouchers extended to eldercare because the regulations didn't allow it. There's a chance that with the new scheme they could extend it much more easily to any form of dependent care, whether it's childcare or eldercare. So I suspect at some point in the next government we will have a proper look at that, which would be really exciting for employers.
Absolutely. Okay, we're just about to close our vote. That is ending now, and we'll just take a look at the results here. So, of all the issues raised by childcare, let's just recap. Of all the issues raised by the changes to childcare tax vouchers, which is the most pressing? Your options were A, to receive clarity on the changes to childcare vouchers and the new scheme. B, the need for us to find family-friendly benefits to replace the employer involvement. C, communicating the details and pros and cons of each scheme. And D, with the loss of the NI subsidy. We have an overwhelming winner, which is A, to receive clarity on the changes to childcare vouchers and the new scheme. So it's information. Information is what everyone's after at this point, not just from the government, but from information that employers want, so that they can provide that information to their employees. So we're agreed that and that reflects the survey results that we had as well. 85% came back saying that their most pressing concern was communicating the complexity of these changes.
But before you can communicate, you've got to know what the changes
are.
are.
Yes, that would help. So the government's still got a lot of work to do to communicate this and to lay out very clearly how this is going to work. And we're assuming that that's not going to happen until A, after an election, and B, after an appeal about who is going to be the account provider for the scheme.
Exactly.
So it's all about communication, as always. So we are about to finish off. I just want to direct you all to some resources that we want to give you some links to. If bear with me 1 second. There we go. If we just click through here, so you can see on your screen now we've got some links to some downloads available from My Family Care on some of the on the employer survey that we did and the results. You can go and have a look at the full breakdown of all of that. And they've also produced a wonderful guide to the childcare voucher changes, which we would recommend you all have a good read of. We've also got a link to some information from Care4 as well. We've provided for you there, plus an infographic that's been actually produced by the Treasury, by the government as well, explaining how the system is going to work. So all of those links are available for you there. And it only remains for me to thank the panel very much for your time this morning. I think we could have talked about that for a fair lot longer, and maybe we should agree to reconvene once the government have demystified further. We'll discuss that. So thank you very much. Many thanks to Ben, to Julie, and to Garrett for such an informative discussion this morning. Thank you all for listening and taking part. InsideHR will be back on the 21st of May, when we'll be discussing the finer details of shared parental leave, which we already touched on a little bit today as well, which is another one of the big changes around family policy this year. So that's on the 21st of May. You can find out more about this and register by going to the HR Review website. As I said, please do give us your feedback. Apologise once again for the technical issues we had earlier, but we hope that you managed to hear the vast majority of what we discussed today and that you enjoyed it. Please do give us your feedback on the webinar and send your questions, thoughts and comments to webinars@hrreview.co.uk. Thank you very, very much for listening, and goodbye.